Yeah, hold on. Perfect. Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining today. My name is Mike Condon. I'm the Vice President of Franchise Sales here at HomeWell. Along with us today, we have Jack and Kathy, who are two of our franchise development directors, and Samantha, who is our franchise development coordinator. And we are super excited to have Mary Pang from FranFund here with us today. We know that one of the most popular questions in franchising, and whether it's HomeWell or not, is I want to start a business, but how the heck do I pay for it, right? And I think that's a very common theme that we all hear. So excited to have a conversation with Mary today, a little bit about different options that are out there, how FranFund approaches it, if I could speak, and really just have a general conversation about funding, what funding looks like in 2023 to get your business off the ground. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Mary a little bit to introduce herself and explain a little bit about her role at FranFund.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mike and Samantha and the entire team. Kathy, Jack, you've got a very fantastic team, and we enjoy our relationship as well. So thanks for this opportunity. You're right. I definitely get a lot of questions on the funding side. And so I'm happy to shed a little bit of light around what are some really common ways that people will fund a business, right? And certainly by the end of this, you will know how to fund your business like a pro in 2023. So a little bit about me. My name is Mary Pang. I'm a funding consultant with FranFund. And what that means is that I would be working directly with you to explore whatever funding strategies might make sense for you specifically. And before, I actually just celebrated my first year with FranFund in January. Before that, I was thank you. Before that, I was in the franchise consultant world. I worked at a franchise consultant organization. So I got to see firsthand just how how do people get funding and get into business every day, and fell in love with franchising along the way. So FranFund, a little bit about FranFund. We were founded through our founder is actually a veteran in the franchise space. They, are very well-rounded. They were a franchisor developer. They were a franchisor themselves. And they also have helped to create other franchise systems. And through their experience, they saw that there was a need for a one-stop shop funding solution for these folks that were looking to get into business through franchising. So we became that solution. And what that means is that we take an unbiased approach when we're working with candidates to help understand, help someone understand all of their funding options so they can ultimately make the right decision for them and their families based on whatever their specific goals and needs are. So we offer special pricing for veterans, which we're very happy to do. Our corporate headquarters were located in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm calling from Connecticut. And so we have a very well-rounded, robust team across the nation as well. So just a high-level overview, what are some really common ways that folks will use some, funding or different funding strategies to get into business? There's a couple of different ways. So equity funding. This would be where someone is giving away ownership in their business or in your business in exchange for money. And we sometimes see this on the individual level. If someone's going to go into a partnership with, with co-owners or something like that, we usually see this more on the actual franchisor, the brand level, when they're looking at expanding the entire brand, maybe nationwide or internationally. But it is a strategy that we'll see folks use. Asset-backed funding is where you're leveraging assets that you have towards investing in a business. So maybe you've got an investment portfolio sitting at Merrill Lynch. They might write you a line of credit against those funds without having to liquidate them. Maybe you've got commercial equipment that might be able to be used. This can also be used as a security to back up that funding as well. Debt funding, there's a couple of different ways, different things that will fall into this category. So certainly leveraging credit cards in order to start a business. Sometimes people will use a home equity loan or a home equity line of credit. So leverage the equity in their home directly towards investing in a business or for working capital or ramp up cushion. Certainly personal loans are common here, as well as bank loans, including the small business loan or the SBA loan. And we'll talk about that program in a little bit further detail here today. And then self-funding. So The most obvious in this category would be just using, cold hard cash in the bank. Another not so obvious funding strategy would be leveraging the 401k rollover or the rollover for business startup program, which allows someone to leverage their retirement money without taxes or penalties in order to do so. And we'll also cover that funding strategy in a little bit more detail as well. I also wanted to mention that there will be time for questions at the end. So we'll certainly make sure to answer any questions that might come up.
So can I ask a question real quick?
You can, yes.
So what does it look like for a candidate that, they've started to research franchises, maybe they've talked to somebody like myself or one of our team members about a certain business? When is the best time for them to reach out to somebody like you or make an introduction call for somebody like you to start looking at options? Because obviously we know nothing happens overnight. So in your opinion, when is that best start time for kind of consulting with somebody like yourself?
Great question. What I would say is, earlier in the process. So maybe they've had a couple of conversations with you. Maybe they've had a conversation around what the total initial investment is. Maybe they've started exploring the FDD, because then we can actually, during our conversation, we can, talk through some real numbers. It just gives a little bit of context around the information we're sharing. And that also gives them time, through the entire investigation process as they're continuing conversations with you. They can also do some due diligence on the funding side, and make sure that they fully understand those funding options. So let's say by the time they, head to a discovery day or meet the team event with you, they can also feel pretty confident that they've got a good funding strategy going forward as well.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Because that's something that always comes up, and it's, listen, everybody's financial situations are different, right? And I think one of the greatest things that we can do in business is just have conversations with people. And I think we always encourage our candidates to have that conversation earlier than later. That way, your options, and it doesn't commit you to anything, but at least your options if this makes sense for you.
Exactly. And what I would say is, if you think about that first conversation with me, right, where we're talking through whatever funding strategies might make sense, you can think of that as an extension of that exploration process that they're having with you, just on the funding side. And again, exactly to echo you, there's no commitment, there's no decisions that need to be made. It's just about what are your options, and then, how can you best explore them further? Great question. So what is the Fran plan, right? This is our name, the FranFund's name for the rollover for business startup program, or the ROB strategy. Sometimes it's called the 401k rollover. It's all the same program. Essentially what it does is it allows someone to invest their eligible retirement funds into their own business without any income taxes or early withdrawal penalties. It also allows someone to use up to the full value of those eligible retirement funds, or a portion of those. So there's no requirement on how much of those funds you use. This is not a loan. There's nothing that you're borrowing. So there's nothing for a client to pay back. And this is actually a very common funding strategy that we see. I always say it's very common once someone knows about it, because it is a very different way of thinking about your retirement funds. We've been told our entire lives, do not touch your 401k, right? And so but this is a very common program for a couple of reasons. So number one, what I just mentioned, it's not a loan, right? There's no debt, you're not borrowing money, there's no monthly payments, there's no interest rates. So it allows someone to reach cash flow faster as they're ramping up their business. There's also no credit score requirement. So maybe someone has a very strong nest egg, but maybe they've got lower credit than what SBA lenders are comfortable with. There's still going to be a way for them to move forward in investing in a business. And we also see this strategy used in combination with an SBA loan. We call it the combo strategy, and we'll talk about that too, how these two programs can work well together. So if we were just going to give a high level picture of why this program is so attractive to someone who's just starting up with a new business. Well, we know that every dollar counts, especially as someone is getting ramped up. So let's assume someone has $150,000 in retirement funds. And if they were to choose to take a distribution, if we assume they're, under the age of 59 and a half, and they're in that 30% tax bracket, they would have at the end of the day about $90,000 available that they would be able to use for, any operating expenses. Versus if they used the rollover for business startup program, they would be able to use the full $150,000 upfront, tax-free and penalty-free. And every dollar does count up in the beginning. So how does it work? And, this is a streamlined version of this, but basically we would create a C corporation. This will be the operating entity for the new business. Once the C corporation is in place, we would also create a new 401k plan, which will be sponsored by the new C corporation or your new business. We will we'll transfer the existing retirement funds from the old 401k plan into the new 401k plan that we just set up. And in exchange for that, transfer of funds, the 401k is going to purchase stock in the new C corporation. So you can think of it as, instead of buying stock in Sony or in Best Buy, the 401k is really purchasing stock in New Business Owner Incorporated. And at the end of the day, when all is said and done, the new 401k plan now owns stock in that newly formed corporation, and the new business has the cash it needs to be used for any legitimate business expense.
I love this plan personally. To be honest with you, I personal experience, I've used it and I've done it. And, again, it's just a great way to think about using your money in order to start your own business, right? We all know what the market's doing. Again, this strategy probably isn't for everybody, but is a great alternative if you have some money sitting in there. I'm a big believer in the plan, and it's very simple to execute when you work with a professional. That's the trick.
That is the trick. That's the trick. It's simple. It is actually a very simple process. Once you've gone through it, so it's quite seamless. And it is, it's a different way of thinking about your retirement funds. It is one way of looking at it is it's a diversification of your retirement investment strategy. Right. So, and you have the cash on hand for starting the new business as well. So also, this is also a benefit of this program is that when all is said and done, the business now has a retirement plan that can be offered to eligible employees. One thing with this is that the IRS does require that every company that sponsors a 401k plan also has a third-party administrator or a TPA to just ensure that the plan remains compliant with any IRS or Department of Labor rules and regulations that might change along the way, and also to administer the plan as the business owner or employees begin participating in the program. So FranFund in this example does become that third-party administrator for the rollover clients that we assist in getting into business. So switching gears a little bit, just talking through some of those other funding solutions that we mentioned on that first slide. So an unsecured term loan is an alternative to the SBA loan, which we mentioned. This is a program that doesn't have collateral requirements. There's no down payment or equity injection required up front. And there's no requirement on what you use those funds for once you have access to them. So there's a little bit of flexibility there, but because there's no collateral requirement, lenders will be looking quite closely in the category of credit. So someone would need to have strong credit, good, clean, strong credit history. They'll need to have outside income coming into their household. And we'll walk through that with everyone, but it's a good program to be aware of. A securities-backed line of credit would be where someone was able to leverage their, if they've got marketable securities in, let's say, Wells Fargo or Merrill Lynch or the Charles Schwabs of the world, they would be able to leverage usually a percentage of those funds, of those assets without liquidating them, but they could essentially get out a line of credit to access those, to utilize those assets. And then a home equity line of credit, which we mentioned as well. So someone could leverage, usually up to about 80% of the equity that they have in their home. And this is not like a loan. It's not a cash out refinance. They would be able to access, let's say, up to about 80% or some amount of that over usually about a 10-year period. And they would work with their local bank to do so. But when we have our conversation, we'll talk through whatever funding strategies might make sense to determine what might be a good option to explore further. Now, SBA lending. So this is another really common funding strategy that we'll see when someone is looking at leveraging debt financing in order to get the business up and running. Now, to be clear, this is an SBA the Small Business Administration is guaranteeing this program, but the loans are still going to be written on the local level by lenders themselves. So, when you hear people talk about SBA loans, it doesn't mean that the government is writing them. It's because a lot of banks are pretty exclusively using these loans because they like that government guarantee. So this program is often used for startups, to invest in a new business. It's also used for acquiring an existing business. It can be used to expand the business that you have currently, and it can also be used for working capital in any of those instances. We have lenders who will write loans as low as $100,000 all the way up to the SBA cap of $5 million. And here at FranFund, we have an extensive network of small business lenders that are both franchise friendly and small business friendly. And we've been able to educate them on the different types of brands we work with, the specific brands that we work with. And that just allows for a much more streamlined process as someone goes through the pre-approval process and ultimately, packaging and attaining that loan itself. So these are just a couple of, categories, or these are the categories I would say that lenders are going to be looking for a borrower to be able to check off in order to feel comfortable writing that loan. So in the category of credit, they'll want to see a credit score of 680 or above. They'll want to see clean, strong credit history. In the equity or the cash injection, they'll want to see about 15 to 20% of whatever the total initial investment is. They'll want to see that the borrower is able to contribute that upfront. Now, 15 to 30, as you see on the screen, is a very fun number. And that range is going to come in because every franchise is slightly different, and every lender is different. So they might look at slightly different things there. But what we're seeing today is that most banks like to see that cash injection of around 20%. The burn rate figure, which you see here, is, banks want to see that a borrower is also able to contribute about 12 months of personal living expenses, and the loan payment to the bank, in the worst case scenario, as the bank would define it, being that the business is not able to consistently cover those two expenses for that first year of operation. So this isn't a check that you're writing to the bank. This is just, we need to be able to demonstrate that you would be able to access these funds if needed, if the business needed your help. And then the collateral component, most banks will want to use a personal asset as collateral for the loan itself. And most banks prefer to utilize real estate as collateral. We do have some banks that are flexible with collateral on loans that are under $350,000. So again, having that first conversation with us and getting into pre-approval will help us just determine, what that probability might look like for someone specifically. Now, the SBA, so this program that we talked about is the SBA 7A program. And this is the most common loan, SBA loan that folks will use. There is another SBA program called the small loan. And you may have heard of an SBA Express loan. Mm-hmm. To be clear, that's the name that one specific bank has come up with to call this loan program, the small loan program. And you can liken it to, when you walk into a Starbucks and you have to call their medium drink a grande because it's what Starbucks has called it. It's kind of the same here. But really what it's referring to is this small loan that the SBA has created. So with this program, lenders will still want borrowers to have strong credit, like we mentioned before, and they'll want to see a minimum of 10% equity injection. This percentage really is going to depend on the startup expenses prior to closing, but there might be a little bit more flexibility. So that could be, for example, maybe paying a deposit on the franchise fee up front and then including the remainder into the loan itself. And this is going to be for loans, loans that are $100,000 to $150,000. So really that on that minimum side that we see lenders. They will still want a borrower to be able to cover up to that 12 months of the loan payments and personal living expenses as well. You'll see here that they will not require personal assets be used. So this can be an attractive program if the loan can be written for $100,000 to $150,000 and someone doesn't want to use collateral or doesn't have collateral to be used here. So this is a good program to be aware of. So the timeline, right? I often get asked, how long does it take? And again, the 30 to 120 days, that's a very fun range. I would say a more average time frame is going to be around 45 to 90 days. 45 days when there's no location involved, 60 to 90 days when there is a location involved. And the timing here is really going to depend on a couple of different things. So certainly what's going on at the lender level, right? Maybe they've got a lot of people out sick that month, or maybe they've got a high volume of loans that they're working with. That could impact the timeline. A really, something that will very directly impact the timeline here is how quickly is someone able to get the documentation together for that loan package. So it can take as little as 5 to 10 days, two business weeks. It can take a lot longer if it takes, if someone takes time in gathering those different documentations. And then outside parties, right, that are necessary in order to complete the loan package. So for example, if you need to get architectural plans drawn up, or if you need to secure a location, those are all factors that can play, can play a factor in extending or impacting that total time frame.
Good thing we don't have any of those stuff here.
You don't. So it's going to be
simple. Very simple for us.
It's going to be much more simple, a simplified process, which is great. So with that entire process, one really important part of the funding exploration process is getting into pre-approval. And we take that very seriously. We want that pre-approval process to be reliable and accurate, both, of course, to the client, to the candidate, right, that might be moving forward, and also to the franchisor, so that, let's say we do reach discovery day or go to that meet the team event, that all parties can be confident that should you move forward, you will have, you will be able to access those funds. So we have a very comprehensive pre-approval process that we take very seriously. And so we have a 99% success rate in terms of obtaining loans for the folks that we provided that pre-approval letter to. Now, that doesn't mean that we're writing letters for 99% of the folks that we talk to, but that does mean that if you've been issued a pre-approval letter from FranFund, you can be 99% sure that you will be able to obtain it.
Yeah.
And that's in stark contrast to the national loan approval rate of 37.8%. So something also with the pre-approval process, you can think of it as an extension of that exploration or that education process. So there's no commitment, there's no cost, there's no hard credit pull. It's essentially just gathering a little bit more accurate information on our end so that we can be sure we would be able to write that loan for you. And again, it gives all parties involved just an extra layer of confidence that you would be able to obtain that funding if needed.
I think that's just a great value add, right? It's because you're able to go in with confidence to know, hey, this is just like we were buying a house, right? Your pre-approval level for a house, that's how the same thing I would equate it to. And just know where you're at from a financial position, and hey, what's realistic and what's not. I mean, that's always a nice feeling when you're starting out this process. Absolutely.
Yep. So with FranFund, we have a very strong in-house team that focuses their full-time efforts on helping our clients to obtain these loans and help guide clients through that entire loan packaging process, which can be overwhelming for someone who's maybe good at getting into business for the first time. So we also take that very seriously. Our entire team has come to FranFund with experience at the bank level. So they, many of them have been in an underwriter role themselves. So they've got a very strong handle on the lending landscape. They know what lenders will be looking for. And you can think of them as that first line of defense, so that when the loan request does go across that lender's desk, they also feel good that, it's been done correctly the first time. Part of that loan consultation service includes providing the customized templates for, and we also help clients to develop their business plans, their projections, their pro formas, and whatever other documentation lenders might be looking for. And then we also help shop your loan with the right lenders to make sure that we're getting, that someone is getting the right terms and rates that it's going to make the most sense for them. So to be clear, we're not the bank, we're not the direct lending institution ourselves, but if we were, we would actually be in the top 5 SBA lenders in the country, just based on the amount of SBA loans that have been written for our clients, which is just kind of a fun statistic.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's really funding in a nutshell at a high overview. Hopefully it gave you some good overview into just the different types of funding strategies that people will use. And I certainly would be happy to answer any questions that might have come up about any of these programs we've discussed today.
Awesome. I did see we had, I believe, one person raise their hand for a question. I don't know if it was answered or not. If anybody has any further questions, please feel free to raise your hand. If not, again, please reach out to your development director here at HomeWell. Feel free to reach out to Mary directly as well. They are a great partner. Whether you're just curious or you are down the road and you really want to get some questions answered, we always value their opinion when it comes to consulting and from a financial position, because again, our job all around in franchising is to set you up for success, and part of that, and a big part of that, is funding your franchise in the right way in order to have the cash you need to get your business off the ground. So I see Jason has a question here.